necessary. We had a recess which was totally unnecessary at the start of the month. It appears to us also that there's an attempt to cram in legislation before the summer recess, and it isn't an orderly management of the legislative programme at all. It's also very, very unfair and has implications for TDs with young children, and particularly it acts as a deterrent for women to be seeking election to the Dáil. At the risk of getting myself into some bother, at the last date sitting, I met one TD here, I'm not going to name him, who was quite drunk. That happened here during the last late session, because backbenchers are sitting about here with nothing to do, and they go to the bar. So this is what the whole thing is reduced to. And we certainly will be opposing this, because it runs right in the face of all the talk and commitments about Dáil reform.
We have to get business done in here. You've just had claims from Deputy Coppinger that we've had no debates on construction and on housing. You have a situation where some of your spokespeople do not turn up for bills that are in here, Deputy Martin. It is true, and we've just spent an hour dealing with questions on the housing and the Cabinet subcommittee on housing. And this bill is a very necessary piece of legislation that had been put back on a number of occasions. And it's time now to move on with it. You're all talking about housing. You're all talking about provision of housing. And here is a very important bill that was put back on a number of occasions in the past. It's time now to move on with it and deal with the situation that we have. And this bill is an important element of providing houses for people who need them, and to allow the Minister and the Department and the local authorities to get on with the business of dealing with the issue that we've been talking about for the last 65 minutes.
Thank you. I now put the question, Deputy Adams. Thank you.
Yes. Taoiseach, I also want to raise on the issue of last night's television programme, but I want to do so on two contexts. Number one, yes, the need for a debate here. But number two, in relation to the Good Friday Agreement and the programme for government commitments by the government to the full implementation of the Good Friday Agreement. And in terms of the debate, and I welcome the fact that you have said there will be a debate, but you've also said consistently that it will be a debate on a motion on the Ballymurphy massacre. And I welcome the fact that we got the draft for that, and I signed off for that in consultation with the families involved, but we're still waiting for a date. It's quite difficult to get the North discussed here with the frequency that it requires. So I would like to ask you, Taoiseach, to ask or instruct or request your whip that we should have that debate before the summer recess. Last night's programme tells us, particularly people like myself from the North, what we've known for a very, 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 very long time indeed, that the extent, the depth in which the British government directed from the highest political level the killing of citizens, and it's also clear from some of the former government spokespersons that the successive governments here were aware, or at least suspected, collusion. And in my view, successive Irish governments have failed hundreds of families of citizens in the North, but also in this state, and clearly the most obvious example is the Dublin Monaghan bombing, Ceann. But there are other cases, the Dundalk bombs in 1975, in which Q Waters and Jack Rooney were killed, and the case of Séamus Ludlow. So the government has a responsibility. It isn't just a matter of us having a debate. The government is co-equal guarantor of the Good Friday Agreement. So where does the citizen look to? I mean, the Finucane inquiry is not established. The British government are saying, no, we're not going to do it. And I have come in here many times and said to the government, put together a strategy using our international friends, using our diplomatic capacity to get the British government to do what it's obliged to do under the Good Friday and other agreements. I also think it would be, and this mightn't be the appropriate time to ask this, the Relatives for Justice represent hundreds of families of state terrorism. that you should meet with them to inform yourself on all of these matters. And I know you're meeting with David Cameron, I think, later this week. And is it your intention to raise these issues? Like this is a neighbouring state whose government authorised its forces to kill citizens of this nation and of this state.
Taoiseach.
Well, Deputy Adams knows well there were 3,000 deaths in the time of the Troubles in Northern Ireland, some on the northern side of the border and some on this side of the border. As I said in response to the earlier question, I gave a commitment in Westborough that I would supply the information that's available in Garda files here on the King's Mill murders, and that's been sent to the coroner. I hope that that's an expression and a demonstration of commitment to dealing with the legacies of the past, and that the British government will now supply information that it can supply in numerous other cases, and there will be other opportunities here also. I might say, Deputy, I will raise these matters with the British Prime Minister. Clearly there's the issue of welfare reform and the situation so far as the Executive is concerned, this programme on collusion, and all of the other issues that are relevant to the situation that we now find ourselves in. We will have the debate, Deputy Adams, before the House rises for the summer. The Whip will make that arrangement. And whether you divide that space on that day for, if we can get agreement on Ballymurphy, on the motion on that, and a wider debate on Northern Ireland issues following it, or all as part of one, we can have that discussion before we actually decide on the time allocation. We will have it before the summer recess.
I'm afraid the time for dealing with the order of business has expired, so I now must move on to the water